Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Remember the Girls' 11th webinar of our 2021 webinar series. Remember the Girls is a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting and advocating for carriers and female patients of X-linked disorders, a group often overlooked by the medical profession. I'm Taylor Kane, the founder and executive director of Remember the Girls and the moderator for today's event. And the topic of discussion for today is, I have a diagnosis, now what? How to find your community and gather resources for your X-linked condition. And we are joined by 5 wonderful X-linked disease leaders, all of whom I've gotten the pleasure to work alongside to advance the status of X-linked carriers. So we have with us Kathleen O'Sullivan Fortin, the co-founder and treasurer of ALD Connect, Mindy Cameron, the former director of advocacy at the Little Hercules Foundation, Michelle Erskine, the founder and president of the Erskine Foundation, Shelley Bowen, the founder and executive director of family services and advocacy of the Barsinger Foundation, and Felicia Morton, the founder and executive director of the CGD Association of America. So of course we have a very expert group with us today. And before I pass it off to our panelists for intros, I'd like to thank the sponsors of our webinar series, Horizon Therapeutics, Bluebird Bio, Ultragenyx Pharmaceutical, and Sanofi Genzyme. Also note that medical decisions, of course, should always be discussed with your doctor. Okay, so let's get started. I guess I will first pass it to Felicia just for an introduction about you and your work with the CGD Association of America.
Thank you, Taylor. Yes, my name is Felicia Morton, and I'm the executive director and founder of the CGD Association of America. I started the organization in 2019, and I began it because my son was born in 2012 with CGD. Well, he was diagnosed 5 months after he was born with CGD. And like many of you out there and many on this panel, I did not know what to do after my son's diagnosis. I was devastated. And thankfully, my immunologist, our immunologist, recommended the Immune Deficiency Foundation, and they connected me with other mothers and mothers of children with rare and lethal immune deficiencies like CGD. And suddenly I didn't feel so alone. I felt connected, and I felt like there was some light in this very dark tunnel. So with that in mind, I began working as a CGD advocate back in 2012, and that helped me navigate the way for my son. He has since had a successful stem cell transplant in 2016. Today, he's a happy and healthy 4th grader. And I just want everyone to be able to have access to the resources and the information that I worked hard to find, and that helped me and our family on our way. And so that is our mission at the CGD Association of America, to help navigate a very challenging pathway, because unlike other diseases, there's not a clearly delineated path. You can live well with CGD, or you can look into transplant options. And so none of those paths are without risk. And so we're dedicated to providing clear, accurate, and unbiased information. I have a background in journalism, and so I have my journalistic hat on. I ask the hard questions, and I provide answers to our community to help them make informed decisions. And that's how we advocate for our patients, X-linked carriers, and families with CGD. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Felicia. Mindy?
I'm glad to follow Felicia because I'm also a journalist. That's funny. I was thrown into the world of Duchenne muscular dystrophy back in 2004 when my then just barely 3-year-old son was diagnosed with DMD. I'd never had experience with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, had only ever heard of muscular dystrophy, did not even know that there were different variations of muscular dystrophy. And suddenly my world was turned upside down by this diagnosis in my younger son. DMD is a very devastating progressive muscle wasting disease. We have been fortunate to have made amazing strides in DMD research field in the past 20 years during my involvement, not because of my involvement. I like to say that, but it's probably not just because of me. But certainly the Duchenne advocacy community has made huge inroads in the past 20 years, and we are now in a place where we have 4 approved therapies with more in the pipeline, including some gene therapies. I got very, very active in advocacy work as a volunteer for nonprofits early on. We have a lot of nonprofits in the Duchenne space. And so I've worked with a lot of them. And most recently, I was advocacy director for a nonprofit called Little Hercules Foundation. And we helped families access state and community-based resources. So, but the reason I'm here is in the midst of all this information gathering and learning and becoming super advocate, I realized I was a genetic carrier of Duchenne. And because DMD is so well researched and so well, we're more progressed in the rare disease space, we had a carrier study going on. And through that carrier study, I found out that I do manifest some symptoms of Duchenne, even though it's historically, as most X-linked diseases are, only affects boys. Well, we're learning now that it doesn't just affect boys, and we have a wide, varying landscape of female carriers who manifest disease, who have some symptoms of disease, and then who are asymptomatic completely. So I really feel like finding out about my carrier status has probably bought me several years of life because I'm heart meds and I'm taking care of myself and know what to look for. And I'm here because I think anybody that's a carrier of an X-linked genetic disease is probably having difficulty convincing people to take them seriously. And I'm living proof that is something that needs to happen.
Thank you so much, Mindy. Michelle?
Hello, I'm the president, CEO, and founder of the AskHug Foundation. And like Felicia and Mindy, and probably yourself, Shelley and Kathleen, I had a child who was born with AskHug syndrome. He was the first identified child in our family because my brothers were born in the 50s, so there was never any understanding of the disease. It was only discovered in 1970. So when I first found out with my son, what I did was start to look for other women like me, and I reached around the world, and that was 23 years ago. In doing so, what happened was I came across other mothers, and 1 became 2 and 2 became 20 and so on and so forth. And our Facebook group today is a few hundred people. So, but the prevalence of AskHug is only 0.4 per million in the general population. So it's rare, which means that you're not going to find lots and lots of people. But with AskHug syndrome as an excellent condition, as you well know, it goes through the family, so it can be sisters and cousins, etc., etc. So that's how it's carried on. AskHug syndrome is known to be a disease that's just to be managed. There's no love in this at all. When people are diagnosed, they're just left. You know, they may get a little bit of genetic counselling, and then after that, there isn't anything. So what we provide the support networks, but we provide more than that. What underpins the service, especially in the UK, is the United Nations Convention for the Rights of the Child, which prevents and ensures that all our services are governed by that, because I think we all need that. And I think as a parent, I feel really empowered by the fact that I've been able to connect with so many networks within our rare disease space, be it, you remember the girls, Global Genes. And I think how I came about finding you was just literally through using the internet and using Facebook. But I met Taylor at a Global Genes conference, and we sat down and you asked me to join you. And I said, it would be my pleasure. And I think it's one of the best things I've done, because actually I've opened up the space for all the mums in our community, and I've allowed that just by spreading the word, sharing, encouraging, you know, and helping them to access all the information that I get access to. And I sit on the Scottish Parliament. I also sit at Westminster in the UK. Honestly, I do all sorts of things. And so I think that, you know, one day when we turn around, we'll look back just before we leave this world and say, at least we did our utmost for all our communities, you know, to try and help one another. So that's where I'm coming from.
I love that. Thanks, Michelle. Shelley, if you could go next.
Sure. I'm Shelley Bowen, and I am a co-founder of the Barr Syndrome Foundation, and I am now, after 20 years, am slowly doing what I really love to do, and I am the director of family services. Emily Milligan is our executive director. I'm very thankful that we now have the resources to have an executive director who has the talent and skills to help lead us to where we need to go. Barr syndrome is a very rare disease, and it's we're aware of fewer than 300 individuals worldwide that are living with the disease. We do know of girls who have been diagnosed with Barr syndrome early in childhood. We have not, I guess, you know, one of the things that I'm very proud about is we were one of the first groups to fund a project to look into X-linked carriers, and we asked around to see what was being done in this space, and nothing really was being done in researching how it affects women psychologically, and the impact and how lonely it is for women to find out that they're a carrier and not have anywhere to turn. Family testing and how it affects them to find out that they're the only female in their family that is a carrier because of a de novo mutation. I myself got into this because I had two sons that were born with Barr syndrome. I was investigated for Munchausen by proxy and assigned a caseworker because there wasn't any history there, and genetics was new on the horizon back in 1988. And, you know, you had these two seemingly healthy little boys that looked great, and suddenly they got sick with cardiomyopathy. So we started reaching out. This was before the internet, so I'm really aging myself, but there was nobody. We were told that nobody was alive with the disease. My first son died in 1990, and I traveled to Amsterdam and met with Dr. Barth, and he suggested that I find others. And before the internet, you don't know how to do that. So I started a letter writing campaign, and then the internet came along and we found others. And before the week was up, after I built a website, I knew of 27 other women that had children with Barr syndrome, and my son wasn't the only one alive. So there is power through community and through knowledge and those Me Too moments. And I think for women to talk and say, are you experiencing this? And it could be, you know, the more you talk, the more you learn about the condition that you are representing. There could be some nuance that you are experiencing as a carrier that could give insights to the condition, and also let us know what the natural history is going to be for carrier women. So I think a conversation is really important, and for us to consider, how do we look deeper into what we should be doing and what we should be looking at beyond what we know?
Definitely. And the Barr syndrome research on women is definitely a really good model that, you know, I've looked a lot into, and just that I want more X-linked conditions just to replicate. So your foundation has done such great work there. Last but not least, Kathleen.
Hi, thanks so much. And Taylor, I just have to say, I'm so honored to sit on this panel with these amazing women. So thank you. My name's Kathleen O'Sullivan Fortin. I represent many things, but also, oops, I'm not going to leave. ALD Connect. How did I get involved with adrenal leukodystrophy, which is ALD? In 2010, my middle child, my son, was diagnosed with ALD. If you're not familiar, it's an X-linked neurodegenerative disease. And so he was diagnosed with some mild symptoms, and it's such earth-shattering news to get if you're a parent who gets any diagnosis, any negative diagnosis with a child. But it was definitely not a diagnosis that I wanted. And I just didn't know where to go. I looked on the internet, but there was not a tremendous amount there were organizations that existed, but there wasn't a tremendous amount of support and answers. And like probably many people, I looked it up online, and it was all bad news. And it was all the worst of the worst stories. At the time I read that my son would be lucky to be alive in 2 years, and that this was endgame, and it was not the complete story. It was not the right story. So I found one point of light, and I have to give her a shout out because I know she's listening today. I found a YouTube video by a mother of a son who she had lost because of ALD, and I found Gina Cosino, and her video was so inspiring to me. And I realized, like, there is work to be done, and we've got to share this story, and we've got to get together. And so in 2013, I got lucky. I was my son's doctor at Florian Eichler reached out to me, and he said, hey, I'm trying to get some researchers and physicians and patients together to start an organization. Are you interested? And I was like, I'm in. So what do you need me to do? So in 2013, we started ALD Connect. And since then, we have really kind of what I see my role there is putting together the resources that were not easy for me to find when my son was diagnosed. And so I've been real lucky all these years. My son is still has mild symptoms. And so I have to take advantage. I feel like I have this urge to take advantage of this kind of mild pathway that he's on, and use my time and energy to advance the ball for all ALD patients. Also, ALD is an X-linked disorder, but it's not recessive. So if you have the dented X, then you've got ALD. And so I think for decades, women were kind of thought of as just carriers. And, it was something special we kept in our pocket and let loose on our male offspring. But alas, there were all these women that had symptoms that were being ignored. And so I'm lucky that my son is diagnosed when there is a general understanding, or a growing understanding, I shall say, that women that have this mutation do have the disease. And so I think it's so important as a community to support each other, because whether you're X-linked recessive or X-linked dominant in terms of your rare disease, it's still rare, and people are still not looking to the women and including them enough in the studies, enough in the research, in the natural history, etc. So I am hopeful that as you grow this big X-linked community, that we can support each other and get ourselves a seat at the table, but beyond, get ourselves, a prescription written in our name with a drug that was tested on us and solving our problems, not just an afterthought or a secondary market for some drug that's been intended for male patients.
Yeah, 100% agree. I see everyone's like nodding their heads, because we can all relate so much on this.
Yep.
But yeah, Kathleen, I'm so appreciative of, what you've done from the beginning of ALD Connect's founding to just, involve women in the conversation, and, what you continue to do every day there as, one of the carrier, but ALD women on the board of directors, and making sure that we're, always have programming, and we have our monthly calls and educational resources. So thank you all for being here. And so the first question that I have, and as someone who has grown up fully on social media. It's so hard for me to imagine a time before social media. When my dad was diagnosed with ALD in 2001, there was no social media then. So my mom, tells me how it was so difficult to find other people with ALD. And I just can't imagine that. So my question is, after receiving the diagnosis, firstly, how did you find your excellent community? And if that wasn't a time before social media or when social media was still like somewhat new, what was that like?
It was actually a piece of paper on the living room floor. It was sit down, and I wanted to put this together, and that's how I did it. I sat down with a piece of paper in front of my fire and thought of all the things that I want for myself in order to help my son. So I listed them. But top of my list was I wanted to see somebody else with the same condition. I wanted to meet another mum like me. And it was the same thing over and over again whenever I went through the process. I also wanted to better understand how you could grow a community of people with that condition, with ARSCOG. I think that today we're really fortunate, like you say, the internet, but that's kind of what I did. It sounds very basic, but it was the beginnings of the organisation. It was the first steps that I took.
I came into a community that was starting to get established. We had several patient advocacy groups that were just starting, but they've gotten huge in the past 20 years. And I remember learning about Facebook and being like, oh, this would be cool to use, to get moms to talk. And boy, I don't know, again, I don't know if I was the first one. It's all about me. But no, I just remember we quickly realized how useful Facebook could be. And we started these groups on Facebook, and we have very specialized, narrowly focused groups, dressing a kid that is in a wheelchair, showering and bathing. We have research updates. We have care guidelines. If you can think of anything to do with everyday life with living with this condition, and we have a face group for it, and they're all private, so people feel safe to talk about things there. And we have one for Duchenne carriers. I saw somebody posted a question about guilt, and we are X-linked with only affecting boys, well, predominantly affecting boys. And it is, I do think the guilt issue is bigger. So we talk a lot about that. We have a lot of carriers that have come from families that had long histories of Duchenne in their family. We all have done a pretty good job of making them feel guilty too by things that we say and do. And I think that we have not been cognizant of that. Lots of, well, if I had known, I wouldn't have had children, or, a lot of judgment just from within our own patient community. That is very, very hurtful. I'm not saying the Facebook communication has all been great. We've had a lot of drug development in the space, and there have been some pretty big disagreements about different aspects. But I think the one thing that we really need to do a better job of is, it's your choice whether you want to have, even if you know that you're a carrier. These kids have, in Duchenne, I can't speak for everyone else, but these kids have wonderful lives. And to tell somebody, well, you must have known you were a carrier, why did you have kids? That's happened within our own community, and I'm not very happy about that. But yeah, I think social media has moved the needle in the Duchenne space dramatically, because we're all talking, and we're all, what did your doctor say? Well, what did your doctor say? Well, why are they saying something different? And really discovering discrepancies and ways to advance the cause has been, I think it's meant everything.
Thanks, Mindy. Yeah, it's definitely true that one of the major downsides of social media is just, that people will say things that they may not say at an in-person conference or event, because, people feel that safety behind their keyboard. But I totally agree with everything that you've said, and worked really hard to make Remember the Girls as accepting as a community as possible. But I really appreciate, you bringing that up, because there definitely are some downsides with having any community online. But I think we would all agree that, those, the benefits definitely outweigh those in the end.
Oh, for sure.
Taylor,
think-
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Shelley, I do apologize.
That's okay. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that when when we started, there was nothing. I mean, there was nothing. And so, I had to learn how to build a website. I didn't know how to build a website, but you learn. It's amazing what you can learn to do when someone's life is dependent on it. I mean, when someone you love can literally die, you don't say it's too hard, because dying is a little harder, so you can't imagine a world without them. So it's amazing what we are able to do when we love someone. So we created a space that we wanted people, and it's funny because I was talking to one of the co-founders, a woman that I dearly love, has become one of my dearest friends in the world, this morning about this, and about how the world has changed and morphed now that we have social media. And it was so important for us to know that we wanted to be the authority of source about Barr syndrome. We didn't want a doctor to second guess us, or, we wanted everything to be fact-based. And we still, I know that it can take us days to answer a simple question, but we're not going to do it without fact. And so we created a website where it would be a doctor could trust what we had to offer, any healthcare provider could trust it, and that basically we weren't going to judge your ability to learn. So you could start at a 101, or you could start at a PhD, and you could get the information that you needed. But ultimately, I think what we don't want is we don't want people to be isolated from information. It's not, what is it that they say about nonprofits that we ascribe to? Not, the higher rule, not the golden rule of do unto others as you would have done unto you. But we, as nonprofits, it's our role to do unto others as they would like to have done unto them, and to give them the education that they need as they need it. So I think, when you have nothing and you start, and you know how important it is to be taken seriously, you do it right. You make sure that you do it right, and you get a good foundation, and that kind of stays with you throughout.
I was just going to quick chime in that social media is great. It has its challenges. But there is something really magic about meeting another same disease space mom in person, or another rare mom. Like, I don't think we have to just, I have found so much support over these years from other rare disease moms and dads and patients. And, I know that when my son was, first diagnosed, we had social media, but it wasn't the same. My friends they wanted to support me, but, they were still I had a lot different worries than they had. And I just remember he was in a trial. It was exciting. And we went for our annual visit at Kennedy Krieger at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And I was in the waiting room, and I had heard that they had 2 patients a day that came into clinic that day. And so I saw another boy who had a similar look to my son, in terms that would be like partially, low level symptom based. And I walked up to his mom and said, "Are you the other mom here for the study?" And we just hugged it out and emailed, and it was just so magic. And so I know at ALD Connect, I'm so grateful for Zoom during the pandemic. But I urge anyone out there, if there's a way you can connect with somebody else and then make it happen in person, it is dynamite. It's, like one of the best parts about pre and what I hope is post-pandemic life for ALD Connect is that we can go back to in-person meetings and conferences, and making that accessible to patients so that we can really, I mean, share a cup of coffee with someone who is walking a similar path is just amazing.
Oh, I don't know what I'd do without my Duchenne community of moms. I have no idea.
Well, this leads really well into the question that one of our attendees asked. So the question says, I read an article saying that X-linked carriers experience more guilt and shame than carriers of autosomal recessive conditions. And so for our audience, that would be conditions where both parents would need to be carriers, while X-linked conditions, it's a single parent is the carrier, and usually the woman. So the question is, do you think that this is something that X-linked carrier mothers have in common, and how can they help each other?
Well, I'm definitely X-linked. Who else on the call?
Everyone is.
Okay. I think that all of us have guilt, but I think we do get over it in time. And I think it helps to have the support of other moms in the same boat. I don't think it's really, for me, it's not a sense of guilt anymore, but I've been doing this. My son's 20 now, and he was diagnosed when he was 3. And I think I had more guilt at first. Now it's more acceptance. He knows that I'm a carrier, and that's why he has this condition. And even if you don't want to call it guilt, it is a sense of responsibility. And it just is the way it is. My husband doesn't really understand when I talk like that. And he's like, you had nothing to do with our decision to have kids, or I mean, I had everything to do with our decision to have kids, but I didn't know. But that gets back to, this idea that if you knew, that you'd make a different decision. And knowing what I know now, 20 years later, I wouldn't have made this. I wouldn't have changed my mind. I would have had kids. My son is awesome. He's upstairs studying for his finals in college. He's a sophomore in college now. And, he's very disabled. And some days I'm a very beleaguered caregiver. It's the struggle is real. 24/7 caregiving is a very, very large responsibility. But I don't feel guilty about it.
I think it does affect young women, though. I mean, for young women carriers, what we have found is that when do you tell someone in a relationship? You haven't had a family, you haven't started dating. Now well, you may have started dating, but in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I could be a carrier. I could be a carrier. And you say, it doesn't bother me. I wouldn't mind having a child like my brother, but you're scared to death.
Yeah.
I mean, in our case, 2 kids died. That was devastating to my daughter. And my daughter has a different condition and she can't have kids, but she, for her, it does. When do you tell somebody on the first date, I'm a carrier? Do you wait till you fall in love and hope that they don't leave you and they'll understand? Do you say, I don't want to have children because I'm a carrier, or I want to have kids, and then whoever you're in a relationship with says, how selfish? I mean, I really think that there's a lot on young women who find out that they're a carrier and haven't even begun their family. I already had kids, and yeah, I'm like you, Mindy. I mean, I wouldn't have changed my kids. I wouldn't be who I am now without my kids. And what is it? My mantra is moments are better than nevers. And to think that, I wouldn't have had those had it not been for my kids. I could say that from this seat.
Yes.
But looking forward, I think there's a real, for you, Taylor, I mean, it's a real challenge. You're looking at, am I going to have children? What if I change my mind? That's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that conversation I've had to have, a few times. And as you all know, if you go on my Facebook, it's very easy to find out that I'm like a carrier because I obviously post about it a lot. But, it's definitely not like an easy conversation to have. And the question of when is such a good one, because, if I always say, if you tell someone on the first date, are they going to think that you think that they're going to be your forever partner when you've literally just went on the first date with them. But you also don't want to wait because, you know, you'd rather just, or at least me, everyone's different, but like, I'd rather know, you know, from the start if what someone's like opinion or if they have questions, but it is really difficult. But yeah, I appreciate, you know, all of your perspective as mothers who have had sons with these X-linked diseases.
I think, I'm sorry, I've done it again.
I was just going to say, I think, you know, there's so much technology now that can help with IVF PGD and selecting which egg, and in terms of if it's a male carrier, then selecting out what sperms are wrong, broken, whatever. So there is that solution that can come along the bend. It's not free. It's not easy to get. There are still missteps in those processes, but I do not envy you that, you know, when my son was diagnosed, I already had 3 kids. And yes, people said to me, "Oh, I can't believe you had kids. We would tell you not to have kids if we'd known you had this." And I was like, you know, I gave them more than just my one defective gene. I mean, you know, good looks, charm, intelligence. Ask me. There's so many things that we give our children. It's just one miscode. So I'd hate, you know, in my own life, I'm grateful that I didn't throw it all away. Even if I, you know, because of a couple CTAGs in the wrong place. But, you know, you can definitely, my hope is that there's technology available if you choose or don't, you know, but if you choose to avail yourself to it, there are ways to try and right the ship.
And if I could just say that guilt is such it's an unhelpful emotion. You know, we aren't going to gain anything from that. In my case, I didn't know that I was a carrier until my last child was born. But there's still X-linked carriers who do feel guilty. But we try to, at the CGD Association, reverse that and empower our patients, our X-linked carriers, because that's our whole mission. And back to the comment about social media, or the question about social media, absolutely, meeting in person is so powerful. And that's, we certainly are out there in social media. We founded our organization in 2019, and in 2012, when Sebastian was diagnosed, I was actually a social media consultant and public relations consultant before, you know, I've been a journalist, but then I transitioned into kind of being the concatenation of someone who could help my son through journalism, social media, all these things. And nothing compares to meeting fellow X-linked mothers in person. There's so much power in that. And if we ever do feel guilty, and let's face it, when we're alone in those dark moments that we still might have, even though my son has gone through a successful transplant, you know, there's still so many things that no one can understand about our journey, post-traumatic stress disorder, all of those factors that we have faced. We can find so much comfort and solace in each other, that when we meet and we have Zoom meetings, we have so many opportunities to connect, that we don't have a lot of guilt. We share a lot of joy, some tears, and our strength and information and our education. So those are things we really try to focus on, and we just find that we get through it together, and we just don't have time to feel guilty. We have too much we can do together, and to encourage one another, and to push forward, and to be powerful. In fact, we have a T-shirt now called Rare Power, because we don't want to feel like we're just rare and alone. We are rare, yes, but we're also powerful. And I just want women to feel as strong as they are, because to have this diagnosis, to be a mom in this condition, in this situation, I don't think there's anyone more powerful than we are. I think that we really need to sing these songs at our highest level, because we sing these songs of joy to each other, that we've made it, we've done it, we've survived, and help other women to just feel that they can do it as well. So I hope that no one spends too much time feeling guilty, especially, there is technology as well that can help, and it is ultimately every woman's choice, even if they do have that information. And so I hope that everyone can continue to just move forward and not spend time thinking about woulda, coulda, shoulda, all those things. It's just not going to help in the end. So thanks for letting me get in my little soapbox there about that.
Oh, it makes me so excited to think about, one day having like our in-person Remember the Girls conference, and, being actually able to physically bring together, women from our group, because we have our respective foundations, but I feel like having so many X-linked, carriers in the same room will just, be so powerful. And what you said, Felicia, too, reminds me, we do have so much work to do, and it made me think of the quote, just as a joke, but if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman. So we definitely have a lot to do as
amen to that.
Female carriers.
Well, I mean, and we do have, unfortunately, in our Duchenne community, we do have a lot, not lots, but we do have a lot of marital strife caused by the stress of, it's not, I don't say that it happens because women are carriers. A lot of Duchenne moms are not carriers, by the way. That might be one way that we're different. We have a lot of de novo mutations, mosaicism in the eggs mutations.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a huge number of women who aren't genetic carriers that had it in the egg. But, we do, I think it's probably more the caregiving aspect of this particular condition that drives a wedge sometimes between the husband and wife, or father and mother. But we have far too many single moms doing this by themselves in our community, often with more than one son affected.
Exactly.
So I
That's
think
something we talk about as well at the CGD Association, how having a rare disease can affect you. We speak openly about how it affects your love life, your marriage, your mental health, all of those things. So in terms of the question of about guilt, really, we can think about it as in terms of, well, depression, anxiety, all those things are related to guilt. Those are things, yes, they might not have the label of guilt, but there are times when those feelings can just be either environmental, or they can be, in the CGD X-linked carrier case, they can be something that are, according to research, biological. So those are really important conversations to have to help all X-linked carriers find the help that they need, and know that it's okay to suffer from these feelings and not be ashamed of it. Know that it's not your fault, and there's care out there for you. You don't have to feel those things. You don't have to feel anxiety that's out of control, or depression that's out of control. It's not something that's natural. That's not something that you have to go through if you don't want to. And to not feel that this is just you. Maybe it's not you. Maybe this is just your environment, or your inflammation. In our case, our inflammation can cause really a lot of things that affect our mental health. So there are a lot of things to discuss to help women empower themselves and just live their best lives.
Definitely.
Well, that's also
It's
also why you need support from your peeps.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, some of these women really, really need the support of people that are that are traveling the same road.
Thank you all so much for that great response. We do have one more question, and this will be our last question before we wrap up the webinar, but it is from John. Thanks for attending, John. So his comment and question is, most people within the X-linked disease communities are women, and not many husbands, fathers, and partners are involved. thoughts and ideas on why that is and what can be done to change it? That is a very great question.
It's a very great question. I have ideas.
I'm not sure what he means about women that husbands and fathers and partners are not involved. Not many are involved. I will say this: what we do for partners is we have a genetic counselor that helps us build out an entire, for a conference and our educational sessions for carriers. We have a whole thread and a whole it starts from the very beginning, from being a grandmother carrier and, you know, being a mother, and we include the partners, and we also include the people who have Farr syndrome in those discussions too, about their sisters. But we believe that there is there oftentimes it's the dad, and I've even noticed when a child dies, people will walk past the father to comfort the mother, and the father's hurting too. And so I think it's really important that we do recognize that grief, and that that trying to come to terms with this is happening. It just manifests different in different people. But I'm sorry, Mindy, I just jumped in on that because
No, that's okay.
We're doing something there. So I hope this helps.
I got the impression that it was more about like the ones that that start the foundations, that do the advocacy work. And I think that is because somebody, and it's not because men are the breadwinners, but there's no money in this. Somebody's got to work, honestly. And I think that's part of it, that a lot of times the men are providing an income for the family while the mother can leave her job and focus on advocacy. Certainly in the more rare diseases, you're not taking a salary, or if you are taking a salary, it's not a big salary. But that gets me back to this question of all the single moms out there that are having to stay home to be caregivers. I don't know the care paradigm with all the other diseases represented here today, but with DMD, the care progresses. So, over time, you really, one of you cannot work unless you've got paid caregivers coming in, or you live in a state that's providing those for you, those services. So I think a lot of it, the financial devastation in our community is extraordinarily high, even if one parent is continuing to work.
That's true. It's true. And my husband actually wrote about this in a book. I don't mean to, I wasn't planning to talk about this, but it's interesting because I did send an e-newsletter out today to our community. What about the dads? And so it's true. We often talk about moms and how moms are the front lines of helping to care for their children while struggling to care for their own health needs. But how are dads coping? What's their story? How are they managing the things they're experiencing, juggling work, family issues, marriage issues, being a dad, their mental health issues? And my husband, who is also a journalist, he wrote a book that was published by Penguin this year called More Than You Can Handle. And it was how he had trouble handling it. And it went into a very candid look at his struggle with mental health, and how he was broken by this, and how he found a way through meditation, by admitting, which was very hard for him. If you know my husband, you would know this, that he couldn't handle it, and he didn't know the answers, and he wasn't in control. Very difficult things for him to admit, and how that was the beginning for him of being able to cope, have hope, and find a way through for himself. And so it went into how rare disease works in our country, what it's like to be a member of this community. When I say how it works, what it is to be a member of the CDD Association, what it is to be a member of the Immune Deficiency Foundation, what it is to try to find the treatment path, how you feel isolated, how you feel that way as a man, as a father, and how to find the way through science and probably salvation. Those two things, both. You took a diagnostic odyssey, really delving as a journalist into the science that saved our son, and also looking into himself and how to save himself at the same time. So if that's helpful, some men have told me that it was really helpful to hear an honest look at a man talking about things that most men have trouble discussing. I don't know about you guys, if your husbands can talk openly about what they're going through, or if you find in your communities that this is something that men struggle with, or if there's more of an openness to it. But I'd be interested to hear what your experience is with the dads in your communities, or the male patients.
We have a lot of fathers that are really engaged, but some fathers aren't. I mean, I was divorced because my ex-husband was unable to accept my son's condition, or even admit it. He wouldn't believe that it existed, and
Right.
He was 10 years old by the time that happened. It was too late by then, because he's already formed his own opinion as a child. He knows exactly who loves him and who doesn't, or if there's any sort of rejection. It massively messes with our kids, and because the mental health changes as they get older, and the care becomes a little bit more in terms of caring for the mental health and looking after them emotionally and socially. They don't do well, but it's massive to have a man, really want to understand and try to understand what your child's going through. And yeah, we also have, like you, Mindy, we have a high marriage problem. People who divorce, we've got single parents, we've got young mums under the age of 18. There's lots of different dynamics there, and a lot of the fathers that are in the group have to be careful. But yes, they definitely engage. I say that because people have joined in today, and I wouldn't want to compromise anybody's safeguarding. So I think that's important to know. A lot of the men message me privately or email me privately for advice. I also, when I've anytime I come over to the States, I always meet with patients, parents, a family, organisation, founders. Taylor, I met yourself, I meet loads of people at Global Genes. So I agree in that, with the power of connectivity and bringing us together. But with us, the male patients that are older really help the younger men. In Europe, they've got the musketeers, they call themselves, and they're all under the age of 30, all struggling, going through different social problems, whether it's jobs, housing, income, and they've got each other. We also run Family Friday, so that's just a standard, and you get all the dads in, or you get the mums and the dads, or we get a combination of patient, parent. It's just anybody who wants to join. It's open there, and it's always difficult because of the time zones. But I find myself up at 3 o'clock in the morning on a regular basis. I think it's important that we open the conversation for men and give them the courage to step forward and try to want to better understand what's going through, what the child's going through, or what they're going through themselves. I think men struggle because they're not confident, even though you might think they are. They're not very confident, and deep down inside, when you dig a little deeper, they just want to cuddle. You become a mum all over again. They're marrying the mothers, and I know it sounds terrible to say it like that, but it's love and care and nurturing and good cooking and all those things that they got when they were young. And they're the things that seem to soothe them, help them, nurturing. Well, the most important thing, none of us have said it tonight, love, actually, because I think the way you love, whether it's your community, your child, your parent, your sibling, somebody else, that is definitely a massive part of it. The way you love, be open and honest and love. I just think it makes such a difference. My community is not as probably as brilliant as all of you, for whatever different reasons, but I think I recognise that there isn't enough of that love. But when you bring people together, I remember I went to Boston, didn't I? I rented a house. I brought them from Florida, the other side of San Diego. They came from all over. I rented a house. I said to everybody, I don't want you to be worrying about spending money or going to fancy restaurants. I'm cooking. And I worked out how to get to your supermarkets and go and do a big massive shop, and just fed everybody for 3 days. We built log fires, stayed in our pajamas, drank wine, talked, cried, laughed. That bonding there was about bringing together different members of the community, just so that people didn't feel that there was, everyone was the same. We're all in the same boat, and love was the key of that. It was really, really nice. It's a good thing to do. So anytime I come to the States, that's what I usually do. Rent a house and invite everybody to come for dinner.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great takeaway. We're getting really close to the hour, so I know we could talk forever, and we'll keep having these conversations, of course, but I want to thank the 5 of you for joining tonight. I know it was a little bit last minute, and I just am always so glad to, continue learning from you as a foundation leader, and I'm excited for, what we will all do together for X-linked carriers. So thank you all so much. And as I said, this will be on our YouTube channel at a later date, so I will get you the recording. But have a good rest of your night.